Thank you very much. Good morning. As our moderator already described, I have a very ambitious task of describing to you the state of freedom of religion in ASEAN. Since we are comprised of 10 member states, my presentation is going to be very general, and I will be shamelessly picking examples that will suit my presentation. So part of my goal here this morning is to get you curious enough for you to go to our website and download our book, which is available for free. So let me start. Can you see? We can close the light. Close the lights. Yeah. This one. All right. Thank you. Okay. Next slide, please. So here in front of us is a map of ASEAN, and some general sub-regionalization can be made. To the north, where you have Laos, PDR, Myanmar, Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia, these areas are mostly dominated by people who practice Buddhism, Taoism, Chinese religions, or traditional religions, including Confucianism. And then, in the southern part of the region, where you have Indonesia and Malaysia and Brunei, you have countries that follow mostly Islam. The exception to this is Singapore, where you don't have one religion that dominates. In Singapore, the religion that most of the people follow is Buddhism, but then it represents only 33% of the population, so they do not represent the majority. And to the eastern part of the region, you have the Philippines, the only country that follows Christianity, mostly Roman Catholicism. Next slide. So as Ibu Tuti already mentioned, this study is inspired by the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, where it says that every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. All forms of intolerance, discrimination, and incitement of hatred based on religion and beliefs shall be eliminated. And so we thought, wow, that's a good place where you don't have intolerance, discrimination, and incitement of hatred. So we wanted to see how close we are to getting there and what countries are doing to achieve this aspiration. And so with the support of the Norwegian embassy, we made a study, next slide, that is comprised of 10 country reports. So one country report for each of the ASEAN country, which contains the legislative and policy framework of that country, the trends in freedom of religion, and also factors and circumstances that contribute to the practice. As much as possible, in choosing our country researchers, we chose researchers who come from that country, who are citizens of that country. In that way, we ensure that our authors are sensitive or respectful of the culture and are aware of the nuances, and that they have the network to get the information that they need. So for instance, for Cambodia, we have Professor Palak, and for Thailand, we have Kem Tong. We were successful in doing this except for two countries, which are Brunei and Laos PDR. For these two countries, we could not find somebody within that country who was willing to write the report, and we had to get a citizen of another country. And then, with all this awesome information, with all the information in these 10 country reports, Dr. Jacqueline Neo, who is a professor at the National University of Singapore, produced the synthesis, which highlights the trends in the region. Next slide. And so we move on to the overview of state-religion relationship in ASEAN. Next slide. But before that, I wanted for us to recall that freedom of religion is underpinned by the provision in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly Article 18, which says that everyone shall have the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right shall include freedom to have or to adopt a religion or belief of his choice, and freedom either individually or in community with others and in public or private to manifest his religion or believe in worship, observance, practice, and teaching. Next slide. And now in front of us, you have a table showing the ICCPR, or the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, and the different countries of ASEAN. So the first one is Brunei, you have Cambodia, and then Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. So this table shows what instruments have been ratified by the 10 ASEAN member states. So with regard to the ICCPR, which contains the provision on freedom of religion, you will see that only 6 out of 10 countries have ratified this convention, and those are Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, PDR, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Even then, Laos, when it ratified the convention, it said that the government considers all acts creating division and discrimination among ethnic groups as not compatible with Article 18. So if the practice of your faith causes division, causes disharmony among different religions, then that is within the power of the government to stop it. Also, after the civil and political rights, you also have other instruments there that have provisions that relate to freedom of religion. And we included the International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and then the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the one on against torture, and then the one on genocide, and then the one on migrant workers, as well as on the status of the refugees. So if you look at the table, the only conventions that, the only instruments that the ASEAN countries as a whole, as all of them, signed are the one on CEDAW, on the elimination of violence against women, and on the rights of the child. Now, even though all of them signed this convention, some of them actually made reservations, and these are Brunei, for both instruments, Brunei, Malaysia, and Singapore. In signing on to the CRC, Brunei said that it expresses its reservation on provisions of the convention which may be contrary to the Constitution of Brunei or to the beliefs and principles of Islam. Singapore also said the child rights as defined in the convention shall be exercised in accordance with customs, values, and religions of Singapore's multiracial and multireligious society. Malaysia, said that expressed its reservation to Article 14 of the CRC, which guarantees a child's right to freedom of thought and conscience. And so they also made the same reservations to CEDAW, basically on the freedom of religion of their citizens. So in light of this hesitation or being very jealous of ASEAN when it comes to being very clear when they sign on to international conventions and instruments where they are very hesitant or cautious to sign on to international conventions, we thought that it was particularly good that they came out with the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration and formed, in their own words, a commitment to freedom of religion. We know that the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration has had many criticisms, but we think that this is it's a good practice to in light of this hesitation. Next slide. And then looking next at the constitutional protection of freedom of religion across ASEAN, you will see that most of ASEAN feels strongly about the commitment to freedom of religion. And most of the countries express that they protect this right in very strong words. They use words like describing it as a right, or they use words like guarantee, or they say shall respect to show that it's an imperative, it's not just an option. The exception to this is Brunei, which merely says that the official religion of Brunei Darussalam shall be the Islamic religion, and that all other religions may be practiced in peace and harmony with Brunei Darussalam. But then one thing that we should remember is that Brunei does not have a Bill of Rights. It does not have a chapter on fundamental freedom. So it's not just particularly about religion, but in general, it does not have a Bill of Rights or a chapter on fundamental freedoms. Moving next to, Moving next to declared state-religion relationship. 3 countries in ASEAN have expressed provisions naming a state religion. And these are Brunei, which for the country is Islam, Cambodia, where it's Buddhism, Malaysia, where it's also Islam. In Myanmar and in Thailand, they stop short of declaring a state religion, although they express a preference for particular religion. For instance, in Myanmar, it says the Union recognizes the special position of Buddhism as the faith professed by the great majority of citizens of the Union. And then Indonesia, it simply says that the state shall be based upon the belief in one and only God. So it does not name a particular religion, but it shows a preference for monotheistic belief. So it's fine for you to believe in anything as long as that religion believes in only one God. And also, you have to believe in one God, because if you're an atheist, as has happened already, you can be prosecuted for defamation of religion. And then Lao, PDR, Singapore, and Vietnam, they do not have any express provision saying anything about the relationship of the state between religion. What seems to be happening in practice is that you are free to practice as long as the government does not think that you're using your religion or your position in your religious organization to say anything bad about the government, to destabilize the government, or to create disharmony or conflict among different groups in society. And then the Philippines, the oddity in the region, it's the only country in the region that has a provision in its constitution expressly saying that the separation of church and state shall be inviolable. Now, if you look at this table, I don't want you to think that if you are on the right side, or is it the right side? Yeah, of the table, that you are a human rights violator and that you don't have peace among religions. Because as our study showed, and as Professor Palak will later say, we found that Cambodia actually has a freedom of religion and that there's respect for different beliefs. And also, well, the Philippines, it seems a very ideal for the Philippines to have complete separation of church and state. But then, in practice, this is not very easy to carry out, because the Philippines is comprised of people who majority believe in Christianity. The people you elect also follow Roman Catholicism, and this translates into the laws that you pass. So for instance, it does not have a law on divorce. Divorce is not allowed because well, most of the people believe in the Bible, which says that what God has put together, no man shall put asunder. Next slide. Okay, so, and then we highlight states facing challenges in maintaining religious harmony. And the first one that we highlight is, next, thank you, is Malaysia. In some states, you will be punished, you will be detained for rehabilitation. In one state, they even tried to make it a crime that is punishable by death. Fortunately, that is not being enforced. Also, because Malaysia, mostly they follow Sunni, if you are of another a follower of another Islam group, like the Al-Arqam or the Sky Kingdom group, you can be prosecuted for deviant teachings. So the deviant teachings or teachings that deviate too much from Sunni can be you can be prosecuted for that. And also, if you're a member of Shia, then you can also be persecuted through harassments and detentions. And then with regard to non-Muslim religious minorities, there had been symbolic violence through demolition of places of worship. I think that most of us would remember a time when there was a lot of reports in the news about the Herald case, where the court said that you cannot use the word Allah in the Herald, which is a publication of a Catholic publication. And after that, first the court said you can use the word Allah even if you are not a Muslim. And then that gave rise to a lot of demolition of places of worship through burnings, throwing pigs into mosques. So there were repercussions out of that. And then also there have been demolitions of Kandi or Hindu temples, and also of, let me see, wait. According to reports, between 2005 and 2014, there were 6 cases where local authorities demolished churches or chapels built by indigenous communities. Also, about 12 Hindu temples have been completely or partially demolished since 2006, including the ruins of around a 1,200-year-old Kandi or Tom temple. And the reason for this is that they did not have the necessary permit. But if you think about it, a 1,000-year-old temple predates the establishment of the Malaysian state. So that argument that you don't have a permit does not really make sense. And then, okay, I already mentioned the conflicts between Muslims and Christians in the aftermath of the Allah case. So moving on. It's okay, I'm almost done. And then also we highlight the case of Muslim minorities in Myanmar, where the most prominent example is the persecution of the Rohingyas, which you also have read a lot about in the news, and also some attacks against Muslims throughout the country. Next. And then we also highlight Indonesia, where there were also calls to ban Ahmadiyya Muslims for being outside Islam, and there were also attacks on mosques and properties. There were also attacks against followers of Shia Islam, and calls for bans, and also violent attacks where it resulted to death and to houses being burned, as well as to other groups, including traditional or animist followers of animism and Christians. So in Indonesia, what happens is that it's not countrywide persecution of, let's say, Shia Muslims. What happens is that it depends on the community. It depends on the dynamics of the social dynamics in the community, of the majority-minority situation in the community. So one community could have incidents of persecution against traditional believers. Another community could be persecuting Shia Muslims, and so forth. So it's not really something that you can generalize as something that's happening all over Indonesia. Next slide. And we also would like to highlight Brunei Darussalam. Although you don't read in the news that they have persecution, that they have conflict, but then we think that this is because they do not have a space for political or civic dissent. So because the government controls so much of the power, there's no voice to say anything about freedom of religion. And also there were reports of systemic state surveillance of non-Muslim groups. And also we highlight the Sharia Penal Code of 2013, which has significant restrictions on both Muslims and non-Muslims. Next slide. For instance, for blasphemy, both Muslims and non-Muslims found to have insulted the Prophet could be sentenced to death or 30 years imprisonment and 40 strokes if they do not repent. If you want to convert out, it's not allowed, and it's also punishable by death. It should be noted that right now, they plan to implement the Sharia Penal Code in 3 phases. So right now, they've only implemented phase 1, where for various offense, you could be jailed or you can be subjected to fines. So phase 2 is when they implement higher penalties, such as cutting off of limbs and of flogging. And then the third one, where they will already impose punishment by death, by stoning. So right now it's still in phase 1, and we hope that they do not progress on from there. And very quickly, I would just like to highlight factors influencing persecution or discrimination. So the first one that we highlight is politicization of religion. This is when political leaders or aspirants use religion to gain votes. They capitalize on the sentiment of the society and say, oh, you know what, don't vote for that person, he's a Shia Muslim. Also, next slide. We also highlight ethno-religious nationalism. It's described as a social movement that claims to speak in the name of the nation and which defines the nation in terms of religion. And the example of this is Malay, where they say that for you to be a true Malay is you have to be a follower of Islam. Or, for instance, what happened, what happened last year in Myanmar, where the Maba Towers was saying that we have to protect Buddhism, and the Mabata were saying that, oh, don't vote for a party that does not follow our ideology, which includes state, race, and religion. And then lastly, we highlight, we think, which is very example, is rule of law. So weak rule of law either because a state does not have the power to implement rights or laws that protect all members of the society, or because it does not have the will or the interest to apply the protection of the right equally to all members of society, also contributes to weak rule of law. And we notice weak rule of law, particularly when a country is transitioning from dictatorship to democracy, such as what happened in Indonesia after the Reformation, what happened in Myanmar after 2012, where they were opening up and moving towards democracy, and where you have less restriction on freedom of expression, and some groups would exploit this democratic space, emerging democratic space, to spread messages of hate. I think I will stop there. Thank you very much.